Liver King here. I got 1 pound of delicious raw liver right in front of me because liver is king. Here we go. My intestines are shattered. I do enemas every day to take a shit. I have to lay down on the ground with the fetal position with my legs to the left to actually go to the bathroom.
Yes, I've seen everything that's been happening with the Liver King recently. This is someone that I've talked about over the years, and recently it's pretty clear something has happened to his mental. It's downright sad and scary, actually. He got arrested like 2 days ago now for making terroristic threats against Joe Rogan, even going so far as to travel to Austin, seemingly with the sole purpose of attacking him, or, in his words, challenging him and fighting him honorably.
No joke, I legit ended up in the ER after trying the Liver King diet. Chills, fever, non-stop vomiting. Y'all, this ain't it.
Tried raw liver after watching Liver King? Stomach said nah. Been hugging the toilet for 2 days straight. Never again.
Day 3 of eating raw liver to get primal, like Liver King. Now I'm on antibiotics and electrolytes. Primal pain is real.
A man living like he's in prehistoric times with a thick beard and muscles carved from stone is voraciously chewing raw liver in front of the camera. This isn't a scene from a movie, it's how Brian Johnson kickstarted his million-dollar empire. He calls himself the Liver King. From a nobody, Brian transformed into the living icon of the ancestral lifestyle, where raw meat, sunlight, and brutal discipline are the keys to becoming a true alpha. In the eyes of millions, he's proof. No drugs, no technology, just living wild, and you'll become invincible. But that very illusion was also the beginning of his tragedy, when everything the Liver King preached turned out to be fueled by $11,000 a month in hormones and steroids. You know, not everyone becomes a millionaire by eating raw liver. But Brian Johnson did. The first time he appeared on social media was in late 2021. A shirtless man with a thick beard, a body rippling with muscles as if carved from stone, sat in front of the camera and ate raw beef liver, even bull testicles, as if they were his most exquisite dessert. At the time, I thought, just another eccentric guy trying to go viral. And sure enough, the video racked up over 10 million views, hundreds of thousands of comments, and more importantly, belief. People weren't just curious anymore, they started to believe. Brian called himself the Liver King. He didn't just eat liver, he preached a captivating philosophy he called the ancestral lifestyle. It might sound bizarre, but when you hear him speak, you'll understand why millions followed him. Eating raw meat, basking in the morning sun, sleeping on a stone floor, training like a prehistoric warrior, all encapsulated in 9 principles that sound like a mantra. But that very image, too perfect, too primal, was also the seed of his tragedy. Because in the end, the entire Liver King empire was built on a simple lie.
Nobody lives the way that I live. I think at the end of the day, if you say he's got an ass full of steroids, invariably some people want to look like Liver King. They want to look like me.
The world back then was exhausted by half-hearted advice and empty promises. People turned to Liver King not just for nutrition, but for a smoldering belief that a strong, healthy, and admirable body was still achievable if we lived differently, lived authentically. Call it a romanticization of prehistoric times, if you will. But for millions of young people trapped in overweight bodies, cluttered minds, and the fear of comparison, Liver King wasn't a joke, he was a manifesto for living. A symbol of relentless instinct and old-school masculinity, no filters, no gimmicks, just meat and discipline. He wasn't just trusted, he was worshipped as an icon of rebellion against an era of synthetic foods and air-conditioned gyms, where protein shakes were cast aside in favor of bull testicles. It sounds absurd, but I've never seen people overhaul their entire lifestyle just because of a man eating organs on camera.
Listen, people are hurting. They're living a life of hate, hurt, suffer, and struggle. Their life sucks. There's a better life to live if we model, teach, and preach this ancestral way.
And then he started selling ancestral supplements. A name that sounds like it was etched on a Stone Age cave wall was officially born. Capsules made from liver, heart, kidney, bone marrow, marketed as containing the power of our ancestors, as if each pill was a piece of buried wild heritage brought back to life. But what made them sell wasn't the formula, it was Liver King's body. Because if a man could build such a superhuman physique completely naturally, then $65 for a bottle of dried liver was like buying back a piece of the wild lineage lost in modern human DNA. Revenue exploded, quickly surpassing an estimated $100 million a year. And his community was no longer just followers, it was like a cult of physique, where the king's words were echoed like scripture. I once thought maybe he's actually discovered something the modern world has unknowingly forgotten.
Pancreas, which is usually tough because of the consistency, right? Then you have heart, which is really delicious and mild, but you have elastin in there and a lot of collagen. You get that connective tissue. It's like gum. You're going to be chewing that all day. And you probably know that this one is testicle, like you said, really mild, almost like a scallop or something. And then this is the king. This is liver right here. This was filtering blood just this morning, so it's actually really fresh.
So this morning?
This stuff is really fresh.
But have you noticed? When someone starts reaching the peak, the first thing they attract isn't just fans, but scrutiny. I don't know about you, but I couldn't stop looking at his body. Not in an admiring way, but the kind of look where you ask yourself, how can a 45-year-old maintain such a perfect muscular physique? Flat abs, arms like tree trunks, flawless glowing skin, all from eating raw liver, sunbathing, and sleeping on a stone floor? Really? I tried to brush it off, because part of me wanted to believe. But I wasn't the only one feeling that way until Joe Rogan mentioned something on his podcast that hit the nail on the head of the whole story.
I assumed you were on steroids. I was talking to one of your guys, and I was like, yeah, he's on steroids, right? Like, people don't look like that. He was like, no, he's not. And I think I'd heard Rogan say you were on steroids.
For flaws, you're going to see a more realistic representation of how they look. So when we look at the Liver King's physique, it's crazy.
I tried to brush it off, because part of me wanted to believe. But I wasn't the only one feeling that way until Joe Rogan mentioned something on his podcast that hit the nail on the head of the whole story.
Super jacked, and he was telling people that the way he gets that way is by sunning his balls.
It wasn't harsh, it wasn't mocking, but those words landed like a stone dropped into a still lake. And you know how it is, when Joe Rogan speaks, the entire community leans in to listen. Because Rogan is a man of truth. He's met all sorts of people, interviewed athletes and medical experts alike, and he can smell a lie from miles away. Right after that, another figure stepped out of the shadows. Derek, the man behind the channel More Plates, More Dates. If Joe was the one to spark the question, Derek was the one to hunt for the answer. He wasn't angry. He didn't need to be sarcastic. Derek just did what he always does. He looked closely. He analyzed every photo, every video of Liver King. The shoulder muscles too pumped. The chest striations unnaturally sharp. The skin thin like plastic wrap. A telltale sign familiar to anyone who's used steroids. And then Derek posed a question, not to anyone in particular, but to everyone who had ever believed.
There's no way you can look like that in your 40s. That jacked. I mean, he's preposterously jacked. Do we have a fucking... now that we know that he's full of shit, we're talking about the Liver King.
At that moment, I knew I wasn't the only one doubting anymore. That question spread like a crack on glass bit by bit until the entire wall of belief began to fracture. People started talking. Doctors spoke up, dissecting Liver King's physique. Videos flooded YouTube. No longer an idol, Liver King became a subject of study. What made things even messier was that no one had concrete proof yet. It was all suspicion and speculation. And then the silence was shattered. Derek reappeared, but this time he wasn't asking questions. He revealed something undeniable, a leaked email with Brian Johnson's own signature. In it, Liver King meticulously listed the hormones he was using: testosterone, omnitrope, deca, winstrol, all carefully managed by a hormone specialist doctor. The total cost per month? $11,000. No more doubts, no more ancestral belief, just one stark truth. The man who shouted 100% natural every day was in reality a product of needles and a chillingly detailed list of drugs. Information began spreading rapidly across social media, and the pressure started mounting. It was no longer just a few negative comments or a handful of expose videos on YouTube. It was a tidal wave of anger surging through every corner that had once been filled with Liver King's fans. And then, a confession video was posted. The opening scene, Johnson sitting on a large leather chair like a throne, no longer shouting, no longer eating raw liver, just a somber gaze and a chilling opening line.
Because I lied, and I misled a lot of people. I've stated that this is a complicated as topic, at least to me it is, because before social media, I was rich and anonymous, and after social media, I'm still rich.
Do you hear that? He didn't deny it, but he didn't apologize either. Instead, he spun it all from a personal mistake into a community mission.
I've convinced myself that this had nothing to do with the ancestral message. I convinced myself that I'm not a competitive athlete of any kind, so who the am I cheating?
You could say Liver King is a textbook example of a calculated confession, and that's precisely the problem. In today's influencer culture, noble motives are being used as a shield for wrongdoing. Liver King wasn't the first to do this, but the way he did it, methodical, cold, and unapologetic, made the whole thing feel strangely shameless. Have you noticed? The narrative shifted from "I deceived you all" to "I sacrificed my image to protect you." A role reversal from culprit to savior, from manipulator to victim of his own making. After that half-hearted confession video, I thought it would all end there. He'd retreat for a while, disappear from the radar, or at the very least, stay quiet. But no, not only did it not stop, things started veering into an even more unsettling direction. It seemed that when his idol status crumbled, Liver King no longer knew what to cling to, except for an increasingly unhinged frenzy within himself. And if that fall wasn't bizarre enough, picture this. A shirtless man wearing a fox fur hat, holding two gold-plated AR-15s, standing in the middle of a luxurious hotel room. His face was taut like a drawn bowstring, his eyes no longer radiating belief, but wild, desperate confusion. Then he looked straight into the camera and declared war.
Joe Rogan, I'm calling you out. My name's Liver King. Man to man. I'm picking a fight with you. Yeah. I have zero training in jiu-jitsu. You're a black belt. You should dismantle me. But I'm picking a fight with you.
His expression then was no longer the arrogant confidence of a primal warrior. It was something broken. His eyes were wide open, too wide, his jaw clenched as if trying to hold on to some version of himself, but failing. Amid the dim lights of the hotel room, what reflected on his face wasn't strength, but a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, confusion, and a fear he himself likely couldn't name. No longer the Liver King, just a man trapped amid the ruins of the persona he had created. An image that made me, and perhaps you, unable to help but wonder. Is this the reaction of a wounded man, or the final price of living too long in a facade built on admiration, worship, and lies? Less than 24 hours later, social media erupted with unverified rumors that Brian Johnson, the man who once stood like a bronze statue in the spotlight, had been at the Four Seasons Hotel in Austin in a state of utter chaos. Some posts even described him as being escorted away, wearing an ankle monitor, and ordered to undergo a mandatory psychological evaluation within 7 days. There were also claims that he was banned from approaching Joe Rogan within a 200-meter radius, but so far no official documents have confirmed this. The truth remains unclear. But whether real or merely a product of collective imagination, that moment marked a turning point, where a king once admired is now viewed with suspicion, pity, or worse, as the final act of a spectacle. After the downward spiral with those unhinged videos, a question echoed not just in my mind, but across forums, analysis videos, and lengthy Reddit posts. Why would someone who had climbed to such heights self-destruct so recklessly? 1 million followers, hundreds of millions in annual revenue, a community that practically worshipped him, calling him the ancestral leader, living by every principle he preached. Liver King once had it all, but then he lost it all. And the first thing to shatter wasn't the money, wasn't the fame, but the trust. The most fragile yet most valuable asset a man like him ever possessed. When the lie was exposed, those who ate raw liver like him, who slept on stone floors like him, began to turn their backs. The tribe, that so-called virtual clan, disintegrated. Half felt betrayed, the other half tried to defend him until they exhausted themselves with their own internal contradictions, and then the consequences came. Products were returned. A $25 million class action lawsuit was filed, though dismissed. The stain couldn't be washed away. Distribution contracts were pulled. Inventory piled up like the dried remains of a fallen empire. And it wasn't just Liver King. It was Brian Johnson, the real man, who was no longer invited to any conferences, podcasts, or interviews. He went from a trendy icon to a textbook cautionary tale in every digital morality lesson. A charlatan, a modern-day pretender, a warning to the next generation of influencers. Don't build an idol on a foundation of lies, because when the winds rise, everything will collapse, and you won't have time to find yourself again. The fall of Liver King, at a glance, seems like just another scandal among the many names that have faded on social media. But if you step back a little and look deeper, you'll see it's a tragedy of our era, where image is worshipped over character and beautiful promises carry more weight than the truth. Brian Johnson didn't just lie. He built his entire life on that lie and lived in it for so long that he couldn't escape. When the truth came knocking, he didn't choose honesty, he chose to explain. He didn't choose remorse, he chose to keep performing. And the final question for me, for you, for all of us is this. In a world that glorifies image, where everyone strives to become the most admired version of themselves, when will we dare to truly be ourselves?